Today we will study Feste as a character, examining Act 1, Scene 5 primarily. You will need to open up your book to page 15. Of all the characters, Feste is the one most associated with the title of the play, Twelfth Night, or What You Will. What is Twelfth Night? Twelfth Night is January 5th, sometimes celebrated January the 6th, the last day of the Christmas season. At the end of the 12 days of Christmas comes a special day called the Epiphany, or Three Kings Day. This holiday, which falls on January the 6th, is celebrated as the day when the three wise men, also called the Three Kings, first saw baby Jesus and gave him gifts. Feste's name, it means revels in Italian, to revel. One would enjoy themselves by being loud, eating, drinking to excess. Feste is the incarnation of this holiday, though Sir Toby is the excess, obviously. During the holiday, not dissimilar to Mardi Gras, a mock king is crowned. He is the Lord of Misrule, Festus. Feste is the one character most associated with music, for he sings upon request, multiple times. Feste and Malvolio may be seen as opposing abstractions, such as Carnival versus Lent, Holiday versus Reality, Misrule versus Rule. Feste represents the play's festivity, which eventually triumphs over Malvolio's Puritanism. And we'll study Malvolio in a second video. This can be seen with other characters. Orsino gives his mind to all the shapes in fancy. Then there is Olivia, who is accused by Viola of lacking any passion. Feste is able to penetrate all the masks of the other characters, and yet he succeeds in retaining his own. If Malvolio points out whenever a character breaks a rule, Feste points out the folly of those who are supposed to be wise. In Act 1, Scene 5 with Maria, which in your book should be page 15, the scene begins with Maria reprimanding Feste for being gone from the court, from Olivia's house. No one knows where he's been. This dialogue immediately establishes his character, without regard for any rules. Shortly after their dialogue, in an aside, Feste says, "Better a witty fool than a foolish wit." This is an example of anti-metaboly, or put simply, the repetition of words in inverted order. And Feste is the king of wordplay. Afterwards, Olivia enters, and in an attempt to redeem himself from being away from court, Feste explains to her, and this should be at the bottom of page 17, bottom of page 16 in your book. "Olivia, go to, you're a dry fool, I'll no more of you. Besides, you grow dishonest." Clown. "Two faults, Madonna, that drink and good counsel will amend. Forgive the dry fool drink, then is the fool not dry. Bid the dishonest man mend himself. If he mend, he is no longer dishonest. If he cannot, let the botcher mend him. Anything that's mended is but patched. Virtue that transgresses is but patched with sin, and sin that amends is but patched with virtue. If that is simple syllogism will serve so, if it will not, what remedy? And there is no true cuckold but calamity, so beauty's a flower. The lady bade take away the fool, therefore I say again, take her away." When Feste says, "Virtue that transgresses is but patched with sin, and sin that amends is but patched with virtue," what he's saying is, nothing is all good or all bad. a few lines down, he says to Olivia, "So beauty's a flower." And we know from poetry from this time period, if a flower is referenced, there will be also some reference to it fading. So he's saying that she should get married, that she's just wasting away at this point. A few more lines down, Olivia asks Malvolio, "What think you of this fool, Malvolio? Doth he not mend? Is he not forgiven?" "Yes, and shall do till the pangs of death shake him. Infirmity, that decays the wise, doth ever make the better fool." So he's becoming all the more foolish as he ages and decays, Malvolio says. Feste, "God send you, sir, a speedy infirmity, for the better increasing your folly. Sir Toby will be sworn that I am no fox, but he will not pass his word for 2 pence that you are no fool." So Feste is firing back here that if illness makes people foolish, then he hopes Malvolio gets sick quickly. Olivia, "How say you to that, Malvolio?" Here Shakespeare's giving Malvolio a chance to speak and give opportunity for Malvolio to be characterized as this Puritan, this rule follower. He says, "I marvel your ladyship takes delight in such a barren rascal. I saw him put down the other day with an ordinary fool that has no more brain than a stone. Look you now, he's out of his guard already. Unless you laugh and minister occasion to him, he is gagged, I protest. I take these wise men that crow so at these set kind of fools no better than the fool zanies." So he doesn't see why Olivia takes enjoyment in him, that he's dry, that he's not even funny. And Olivia responds, "Oh, you are sick of self-love, Malvolio, and taste with a distempered appetite. To be generous, guiltless, and of free disposition is to take those things for bird bolts that you deem cannon bullets." So she reprimands him for magnifying the situation much larger than it is. She's comparing bird bolts, which are blunt arrows, to cannon balls. "There is no slander in a loud fool, though he do nothing but rail, nor no railing in a known discreet man, though he do nothing but reprove." So she's reminding Malvolio that Feste is a paid employee, and that's what he gets paid to do, just like Malvolio is a paid employee who gets paid to reprove everyone gently. Feste is the word master, the player of words. In Act 5, Scene 1 at the beginning, I'll give a good example of this. He uses a paradox, which is a figure of logical self-contradiction. A statement that appears to be self-contradictory or silly, but may actually contain latent truth. And the fools in Shakespeare plays are always the wisest characters of them all. So Orsino enters. "I know thee well. How dost thou, my good fellow?" Feste, "Truly, sir, the better for my foes and the worse for my friends." Orsino, "Just the contrary, the better for thy friends." Feste, "No, sir, the worse." Orsino, confused, "How can that be?" Feste, "Marry, sir, they praise me and make an ass of me. Now, my foes tell me plainly I am an ass, so that by my foes, sir, I profit in the knowledge of myself, and by my friends I am abused, so that conclusions to be as kisses, if your 4 negatives make your 2 affirmatives, why then the worse for my friends and the better for my foes." Again, to reiterate, Feste is the closest to the title of the play and the idea of this holiday, this polar opposite from Malvolio. So he is associated with music for a very good reason. The word music appears 11 times in the play. Feste sings all 4 of the full songs. Act 1, Scene 3, Act 2, Scene 4, Act 4, 2, and Act 5. And we won't have time to look at them now. At the beginning of Act 3, Viola is being called back to Olivia's house for the first time. and she meets Feste along the way. And in their little banter, you learn how witty they both are and how intelligent, especially Feste is. And there seems to be a hint that he's kind of onto her disguise. Viola says, "Save thee, friend, and thy music. Dost thou live by the tabor?" And a tabor would be a drum. Feste, "No, sir, I live by the church." Ha ha. Viola, "Art thou a churchman?" "No such matter, sir. I do live by the church, for I do live at my house, and my house doth stand by the church." Viola, "So thou mayest say, and the king lies by a beggar, if a beggar dwell near him, or the church stands by the tabor, if thy tabor stand by the church." Feste, "You have said, sir, to see this age, a sentence is but a cheverel glove to a good wit. How quickly the wrong side may be turned outward." Now, Shakespeare's father was a glove maker, so he would have been familiar with gloves, especially cheverel ones, that can literally be turned inside out as you're taking them off. And he's making that comparison between the glove and how a sentence and even words can be turned outside in. Viola, "Nay, that's certain. They that dally nicely with words may quickly make them wanton." Feste, "I would therefore my sister had no name, sir." Viola, "Why, man?" Feste, "Why, sir, her name's a word, and to dally with that word might make my sister wanton. But indeed words are very rascals, since bonds disgrace them." Skipping a few lines down, Viola asks him, "Art not thou the Lady Olivia's fool?" Feste responds, "No, indeed, sir, the Lady Olivia has no folly. She will keep no fool, sir, till she be married. I am indeed not her fool, but her corrupter of words." If Feste is associated with the theme of madness, it is by way of speaking of and tormenting Malvolio to madness in the darkroom scene. As for the theme of disguise and deceit, it is Feste who disguises himself, unnecessarily, by the way, during the darkroom scene. He disguises himself as the parson. Most likely the best way to drive Malvolio mad would to be using someone of his own kind, someone he would trust. So a man of the cloth. So that makes perfect sense why Feste would, or why Maria would suggest he dress up like that. Maria says, "Nay, I pray thee, put on this gown and this beard. Make him believe thou art Sir Topaz, the curate." So in closing, many of Shakespeare's plays, comic, tragic, romance, contain fools. Touchstone and As You Like It, you're familiar with him from The Seven Ages of Man. All the world is a stage, and all the women and men are merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and each man in his time has his part. In Hamlet, you have probably seen Hamlet holding a skull, and the skull is of a court jester, a fool who has passed away, and they've kept his skull. So the fool being the wisest character in the plays, it's not a surprise why Hamlet would be picking the skull up and talking to it for some needed help. Nick Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream, although his head is turned into that of a donkey, he is the wisest, the most philosophical. Trinculo in The Tempest, one of Shakespeare's last plays, and the fool in King Lear, who just happens to sing the exact same song that Feste sings at the closing of the play. To wrap up, the fool prefers to view life from the wings, commenting on the passing show in his sadly melodious way. Shakespeare's fools are subtle teachers, reality instructors. They amuse, persuade, and entice their supposed betters into truth or something like it. And this concludes our lovely discussion on Feste. So now you'll want